Hey everybody, I'm Tim Mooney. I am the director of the Timothy Mooney Repertory Theater, a touring theater company that brings one-man shows to schools, conferences, festivals all across the US and Canada, sometimes even to Denmark. My one-man play, Breakneck Hamlet, is my race through what may be the greatest play of all time in just 1 hour. In it, I perform the greatest speeches of Hamlet, all the while whipping past the slow parts with snarky narration. You can catch Breakneck Hamlet live online this Sunday and Monday, June 7th and 8th, 2020, and again early August and late September. It's the start of my second pass through 8 of my one-man plays in 8 weeks. Next week, I'm back with another, The Greatest Speech of All Time. Every week, I'm also doing these brief explainer videos. My goal here is to double your ability to access, understand, and enjoy each of these plays. Check out my YouTube page, links up above, to find other stuff that I have to say about Hamlet, as well as loads of clips and previews from all of these plays. And hit subscribe if you want to make sure you don't miss anything. I put up these videos every Friday in advance of the Sunday, Monday performances. So, here we go. In past sessions, I've been challenging myself to answer 5 different questions about the play at hand. This week, I'm limiting myself to one very important one. What is the most significant theme of this play, and how does it play out? The Elizabethans believed in something called the Great Chain of Being, starting with God, the archangels, the cherubim and seraphim, on down into humanity. Humanity then picks up the chain with the king at the top, followed by the queen, princes, nobility, and then on down to the merchants and eventually peasants. It gave stability to the kingdom if we assume that it all had some order, that the king was divinely appointed. Likewise, each individual family has its own great chain, from dad to mom, sons to daughters, eventually to servants. Supposedly, God put Dad where he was because he was special. He had more of the Holy Spirit somehow within, and you can't break that chain, hence patriarchy. But it goes farther. There would also be a great chain amongst the animals. The lion, king of the jungle, at the top. This predated Darwin, so monkeys were, well, as you travel downwards, things get less sentient, with lesser powers of awareness and lack of senses, as with worms or oysters. It continues on. Plants lacked senses, except perhaps to feel the sun on their face, to blossom in that direction. But we still descend from plants, with leaves and flowers, on down to mushrooms and moss. Last and least, minerals could not move, sense, grow, or reproduce, but some were certainly more valuable than others as we move from diamonds and gold to, say, rocks and dirt. Once you have this concept securely fixed in mind, this play starts to pop. You may suddenly start to realize that Shakespeare and Hamlet are juggling with this equation all the time, framing and reframing it. Obviously, at the top of the order is Claudius, the king. But Claudius gained the throne unlawfully, killed his brother, and married Queen Gertrude before Hamlet could get back in town to claim the crown. Hamlet was young and untested. Claudius, at least, might be an effective statesman, handling international affairs with savvy efficiency, as he seems to do with Norway early on. But the original sin of killing his brother has undermined the integrity of the entire country. Something is rotten in the state of Denmark. Disorder and decay consume it from the inside, carrying what had been a healthy chain of being downwards into sickness and rot. Alongside this are 2 seemingly separate themes, acting and spying. Both feature people presenting some form of a lie to the outside world. Spies seemingly degrade man's state of understanding and moral integrity with lies. Actors use a fundamental and understood mistruth, the premise of a fiction, which may instill a greater wisdom, perhaps an elevation of the human spirit. Shakespeare might well have seen this as his own place. Wherever he himself might have stood on the great chain, his fictions facilitated a passage of the human spirit, we assume, to a higher state of awareness, thought, moral contemplation. One's position on that chain is never quite fixed or immobile. Shakespeare describes men acting like beasts, like plants, like the very dust of the earth. We question again and again what awaits after death, on elevation to a higher plane of existence, heaven, purgatory, hell, or perhaps withering bones lying in the ground. Start to tune your ear to listen for words like beasts, monster, dust, worms. Hamlet is the prince who should be king. He is caught in a rift, a crack, a flaw in the great chain of being. He is left questioning who he really is and or if he really is or ought be. He does not have the label of king, but does he perhaps have the moral, spiritual quality of one who is high on that chain? Here's the first line from Hamlet's very first soliloquy. "Oh, that this too solid flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew." Hamlet starts envisioning his own transformation from a solid, animated human being into a kind of a nothingness, a melted, watery substance. He goes on to describe the world itself as an unweeded garden, things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. Hamlet describes the differences between the two kings, his father and his uncle, as the equivalent of Hyperion to a satyr. Hyperion, one of the Greek gods who supposedly was father to the sun, the moon, and dawn. A satyr, a lustful, drunken, woodland god, usually depicted as a man with goat's ears, tail, legs, and horns, in other words, a monster. Amid his sadness, Hamlet describes his conflicted vision of man, spiraling in the course of an instant from the top to the bottom of the great chain of being. What a piece of work is a man, how noble in reason, how infinite in faculty, in form and moving, how express and admirable, in action, how like an angel, in apprehension, how like a god. The beauty of the world, the paragon of animals, and yet to me, what is this quintessence of dust? Hamlet questions his own lack of humanity in comparison to the emotional explosiveness he observes in an actor delivering a speech about Hecuba, and calls himself, in comparison, a rogue and peasant slave, a dull and muddy-mettled rascal, pigeon-livered, insisting that if he were fully human, I should have fatted all the region kites with this slave's offal. In other words, he should have fed Claudius to the vultures. We'll spend more time on to be or not to be in another video, but for now, just recognize that in this most famous speech of all, Hamlet is questioning whether he ought to get off of this great chain of being altogether, to not be. Hamlet criticizes Ophelia in the Get Thee to a Nunnery speech, complaining that wise men know well enough what monsters you make of them. Hamlet, addressing the actors, warns them against bad acting, comparing such actors to men who must have been conceived by nature's journeymen, by what sounds a lot to me like apes. Oh, there be players that I have seen play, and heard others praise, and that highly, not to speak it profanely, that neither having the accent of Christians, nor the gait of Christian, pagan, nor man, have so strutted and bellowed, that I thought some of nature's journeymen had made men, and not made them well, they imitated humanity so abominably. Again, Hamlet compares his late father to his uncle. First, he shows his mother a portrait of his father, mentioning 4 different gods in comparison. See what a grace was seated on this brow, Hyperion's curls, the front of Jove himself, an eye like Mars to threaten and command, a station like the herald Mercury, new lighted on a heaven-kissing hill, a combination and a form indeed, where every god did seem to set his seal to give the world assurance of a man. Yes, he's put his dad on a pedestal. And for his uncle, look you now what follows. Here is your husband like a mildewed ear. And then Hamlet proceeds to speculate just how far down the chain his mother must have fallen to take up with this monster. Keep in mind that part of what distinguishes men from lower forms of life is the function of the senses, where we get the phrase sentient being. Sense, sure you have, but sure that sense is apoplexed. Eyes without feeling, feeling without sight, ears without hands or eyes, smelling sans all, or but a sickly part of one true sense could not so mope. Hamlet seems to save some of his most damning depictions for Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, who he quickly realizes are spies for the king, and Hamlet describes Guildenstern as one of the lowest forms of life, a sponge that soaks up the king's countenance, his rewards, his authorities. But such officers do the king best service in the end. He keeps them like an ape in the corner of his jaw, first mouthed to be last swallowed. When he needs what you have gleaned, it is but squeezing you, and sponge, you shall be dry again. Hamlet, having killed Polonius, tells the king that Polonius is at supper, not where he eats, but where he is eaten. Your worm is your only emperor for diet. We fat all creatures else to fat us, and we fat ourselves for maggots. Your fat king and your lean beggar is but variable service, 2 dishes, but to 1 table. A man may fish with the worm that hath eat of a king, and eat of the fish that hath fed of that worm. Hamlet continues to question, what is a man, if his chief good and market of his time be but to sleep and feed? A beast, no more. Hamlet, having contemplated the descent of his favorite court jester Yorick, whose skull has just been dug out of the ground, imagines the greatest conquerors of all time reduced to an even lesser state. Why may not imagination trace the noble dust of Alexander till he find it stuffing a bunghole? Imperious Caesar, dead and turned to clay, might stop a hole to keep the wind away. In other words, the greatest of all kings and emperors, Alexander and Caesar, reduced to clay, less than all humanity, all animals, and even vegetation, not even a brick. They're the grout in between the bricks. My final example, though certainly there are tons more that you'll be able to find now very easily. In Act 5, we discover that Hamlet has sent Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to certain death. Here's how he justifies it. "'Tis dangerous when the baser nature comes between the pass and fell insensed points of mighty opposites." That's pretty cold, but in essence, Hamlet is saying they were meddling above their pay grade, jumping the queue in the great chain of being. So that's how I finally get Hamlet. There's more there to get, but if you keep these things in mind, you've already doubled your likelihood of being able to totally get this play. Please leave comments and more and questions in the space below. I'll be coming back to answer other oft-asked questions, such as, why can't Hamlet decide? And is Hamlet really crazy? If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like or subscribe to this channel. There's a lot more that I'm going to be covering. Come check out Breakneck Hamlet. I race through the entire play in just 1 hour. That's Sunday, June 7th on Facebook, or Monday on June 8th on Zoom. Or Sunday, Monday, August 2nd and 3rd, Sunday, Monday, September 27th, 28th at 9 p.m. Central Time for all shows. Tickets for Monday night shows are $5 and available at calendly.com/TimMooneyRep. The show is also available to come to your school or theater group, or I can perform it for you online. We are a not-for-profit group dedicated to inspire, inform, enlighten, educate, and entertain. We have a Patreon campaign. You can sign on for as little as $1 a month. This month's latest new swag, Breakneck Hamlet masks. Or you can make a direct one-time donation at timmooneyRep.com. This play is also available as a book, the Breakneck Hamlet Companion, with loads more notes and comments about all of this, including a running concordance. I comment about acting and research with notes on the left-handed pages across from the full script of the play on the right. You can pick it up online or find loads more at timmooneyRep.com. Thanks a lot. See you on the stage.